going to do it. The first thing you need to do is draw a decent corpus callosum. The world is full of people who can't draw a corpus callosum properly, so get a different piece of paper, keep your masterpiece, and practice the corpus callosum. Just do 5 in the corner, you know. It's really not that hard. The hard part for everyone is getting this sort of S shape at the beginning, right? People tend to draw that as a corpus callosum, and that's not the way forward. Okay? For those of you interested in anatomy, that structure there at the bottom is the lamina terminalis. For those who know about embryology, it's the very front end of the brain in embryological development. Everything develops around it, but it's now stuck in the middle because our cerebral hemispheres have got so big. So you feel better about your, remember, you're going backwards and then round like that. You'll see in real brains that often this bit of the corpus callosum gets a bit thinner and the spleen is nice and big and chunky, but don't sweat too much. Just as long as you've got those basic forms, you're all right. Are we comfortable with that?
No.
Not yet. Well, I have to keep it moving. We can't spend the whole day on the corpus callosum. And you remember we can name 3 parts of the corpus callosum, ladies and gentlemen? Okay. Front bit is the genu. Everyone remember which Latin word it's named after? Knee, that's correct. As in genuflection, if there are any good Catholics in the room. Okay. Then there's the body of the corpus callosum, and then the splenium. Okay. Okay, so now I want you, if you join this in the corner, we're now going to start on the next picture, so you can do the middle of the page here. So I would do one about the same time like that. I always start my mid-septal section with the corpus callosum. It's a nice weighting. And then the next structure that I always draw is a nice big thalamus underneath it. Yeah. You know that in theory, the two, or at least in many people, the 2 thalami touch. So we usually represent that by a little circle over there in the middle. Anyone care to name it? It has 2 names. Okay, no, so answer. Thank you. You're a great advocate. How much better was your anatomy when you left that week?
Probably 80% better than it was before.
Okay. Do you remember the moment when you drew what you had done, and what did it feel like?
Yeah, I mean, it's not great to learn in such a short.
Will you just wave your picture around too? How many labels have you got on there? Okay. So this is the thalamus. And anyone name that structure? Everyone except Kate? That's the right. The interthalamic adhesion. Shall I write it all the way? Interthalamic adhesion sometimes goes by the name. The massa intermedia. If you've heard it before. And let's remember that the 2 thalami, which touch each other like that, create a cavity in between it. Okay? I always think of it, by the way, like a yo-yo, as if each thalamus is like the side body of the yo-yo, and the place where the string goes is a space. Who would like to name the space? No, the interthalamic adhesion is where they touch. That's correct. The 3rd ventricle, which I tend to label in Latin numerals. Okay, is the space between them. So really, when you're looking at the thalamus, you're actually looking through the very narrow 3rd ventricle. And when we do coronal sections, or horizontal sections, you'll see narrow little slit-like 3rd ventricles, which are important for us to know. Okay, so we've made a good start here. Thalamus. Okay. Now, when I draw this version, Kate will remember me saying this, I then start underneath the thalamus and work backwards. And it's really important that you remember these 3 structures in a row that keep recurring across anatomy, across different views. So I do a structure like that, which is the optic chiasm. Okay? And then behind it, everyone should be able to recognize that structure that I've just drawn. It is pituitary, and it's connected by, yeah, it's got a better name than that. infundibulum. I think is the usual word people describe it. Hypophysis is a Francis of the church. And then behind that is the mammillary body. Yes? Which is a part of the structure that's just underneath the thalamus. So this here is the hypothalamus. Yes? Okay, can you see how you can get quite a distance here already if you work your way around from the corpus callosum backwards? Most people knew those names, yes? It's just you weren't completely sure where they all were. Okay, so we've now worked a lot about it. We're going to keep going. I'm going to go all the way down to the brainstem. We'll do. Okay, so if you just draw something that looks a little bit like the lateral surface of the brain to begin with. Okay. That's what I'm looking for, something like that. And what have I just drawn there, ladies and gentlemen? Yeah, I know I've drawn the ventricles, but you can do that. So these are the lateral ventricles. Remember the two of them in case you've forgotten. Okay, it's divided into 3 different horns. There's a posterior horn, and an inferior horn, and I think it's usually described as the anterior horn, not the superior horn. Please don't correct me on that. Okay, and there's an area in the middle that's sometimes called the collateral trigone. Okay, and let's remember that if you're going to do a ventricle, then in the lateral ventricles there's plenty of stuff that makes cerebrospinal fluid, which is Okay, so when I do some of my drawings, paintings, you know, I've got a nice one of my horizontal section here. I've got all the colour ones, so I can sort of show you the colour. I do choroplexus in different colour, which makes it kind of pop out, which is fun. Okay, so that's the first bit. That's the lateral ventricles. We need that, yes?
What's the triangle?
Collateral. It's the kind of, I think sometimes it's also called the atrium. It's sometimes seen as the biggest place because it's mapping onto the sort of confluence of them. But that anatomy is not the most important bit. We need to get from lateral to third. Yes? So we're going to go through this little hole here, which is, you know the answer to this question, ladies and gentlemen? We did it. So let's bring that all together again for us, okay? You remember there was a fornix and there was a space there behind the fornix and the septum pellucidum, which was intraventricular foramen, also known as Monroe. So this is here, this is it, intraventricular foramen. And if you get a good mid-sagittal section, you can poke something sharp through the interventricular foramen, through that space over there. I don't know if we'll have a clean section for you where you can do that, because most of them are, are pro-sections. They're already in formalin. And remember, don't be mistaken by septum pellucida, that's the plural, that are broken. So you see straight into the third ventricle. It's just because it's so septum-like, it just goes. Okay, so this is the intraventricular foramen, and that takes us to the third ventricle. Okay, so the third ventricle, firstly, is going to have a hole in the middle of it, which is the interthalamic adhesion. And it has 3 recesses in it, fascinatingly. Okay? One of them here is related to the optic nerve, goes down there. Another relates to the pineal, but it's usually called the infundibular recess. And the third one at the back relates to the pineal, which is the pineal recess. So keep thinking about this diagram, and I'm now going to draw that. So it looks like that. That's the space. Okay. So that is the optic recess, the infundibular recess, and the pineal recess. It's very hard to see that just by looking in the mid-sagittal section because it's so thin, the third ventricle. The only way to get a good one is to do exactly the same thing that Leonardo da Vinci famously did. Are you familiar with his use of the lost wax method? So Da Vinci, 500 years ago, takes wax and molten wax, pours it into the ventricular system, leaves it to harden, and then dissects all of the brain away, and he gets this incredible, architecture of it all appearing in wax, which he then, sketches for the first time because he's Leonardo da Vinci. Okay, so we're here now. Now, this is first and second to third. We need to get out. What takes us out of the third ventricle? The cerebral aqueduct. And I draw it down here. I usually go with a dotted line when you're going through there, and then make it solid again. And then it kind of goes dotted a bit, and then, of course, in solid you can go like that. And what happens? So this is cerebral aqueduct. What's below there? So what would it be? Central canal of the spinal cord, which you can see if we were to do a nice drawing of the spinal cord, where famously, as I said earlier, the motor stuff would be anterior, if you remember that as well. So that's the gig, ladies and gentlemen. You've got to keep this picture in mind. Have you all done one of these before, or is this your first exposure? Okay. So now try to think through the logic. We are going to be cutting through this in various places. For example, if we trim it through the thalamus, we're going to get a bit of the anterior horn, and a bit of the posterior horn, and a bit of the third ventricle in the middle. So we'd be expecting to see that anatomy 3 times, is the argument. There are other sections in which you might just get the third and the posterior, but the one I like to do has got 3 of them because I want maximum value there. So, and as I said, it's a bit of a prototype. So when you go and look at in the museum, there's 10 different sections. So don't expect everyone's going to look like mine. All of them will look 70% like mine as it moves backwards and forwards. Okay. And remember, we're also so the other way we can cut it, of course, is to be doing it vertically like that, and then we're expecting again that we'll go through the superior horn, the anterior horn, and through the third, and through the inferior. We'll see them both in each case. And interestingly, as you'll see later, not that I've done a limbic system drawing for you, because I can't do everything today. That's I'll come back and do it next year if you want. Okay? So, there is a very nice bit of anatomy in which the hippocampus tracks here over the top. So when you see the inferior horn, you know that the hippocampus will be underneath it. And in fact, often if you have a nice dissection away of the inferior horn, you can see this bit of the hippocampus. And famously, the toes at the front of it. So you can see the toes that we probably have. So they're called S hippocampi. And they're actually quite cute. It's usually 3 toes. Very exotic. So you've got to think about all this. Now's not the time for discussing embryology, but all of these things look circular here. Remember, you've got a nice big head of caudate. Caudate nucleus here. It's big and is going all the way around here as a tail because it's all growing around in that giant circle. So when you cut through, I should take it over here, you're going to get a head of caudate that's next to the ventricle. And you're going to see it the same 2 hanging together again at the back end, which makes it so incredibly either complex or interesting, whichever of those 2 words you have in mind. Okay. So shall we see where we can begin? I like to begin, and remember this is a parody of these things, but I like to begin with the corpus callosum. Okay. And if you want, we can start by going up. So I'm going to have to draw here. A number of diary little things like that. Okay? Remember what a coronal section is, of course, through our 2 ears and down. So it's always good to keep the other drawings we've done earlier in mind. That's why I did the outside first, so that you know when we're in better nick. So let's just remind ourselves here of that. Part of the game here. Do you remember that? So here is your corpus callosum, and above the corpus callosum is the cingulate gyrus. So I've drawn here effectively a cingulate gyrus, but we've just bisected it through. So we are cutting here like that through the coronal section. Actually, I muddy the waters a bit near the bottom here, but I'll show you more later. Okay, so we're now out here on the lateral surface, and we're here now, whatever you want to call it. Superior frontal gyrus, middle frontal gyrus, inferior frontal gyrus. And what do we need to do now?
Draw the basal ganglia.
Well, we'll do that in a minute.
Okay.
I'm not finished with the cortex yet.
Put those
With those what?
lines over those sulfur.
Yeah, I've done that, but
Okay.
what's next after the inferior frontal gyrus? Do you know? No. We'll come to it later. I'll put it there. You can call that the superior temporal gyrus if you want, but I don't want to draw that yet.
Okay.
Because I've got a very important part of cortex that we can't see from the lateral surface. That's important. The insula. We need insula here. So please, let's draw in some quite substantial insular cortex
Oh, right.
on both sides. Okay? And then fine, let's do your middle temporal gyrus and your inferior temporal gyrus if you want. And I'm not obsessed with the gyri here. You know them already. It's trying to find the middle, but we need to give a sort of a space to the middle first. Then the key issue to remember is that in order to make our basal ganglia work, we need to have some triangles. That's the short answer. Okay? So what happens underneath the corpus callosum?
Lateral.
Yes, and thalamus. So I need to make a thalamus so that there's a bit of space for a third ventricle. Okay, so we need thalami for fun. Let's make sure that they touch. Okay, so we can have an interthalamic adhesion over there. And what have we just manufactured here? 3 Aussie Roman numerals. Okay, sorry, I'm not obsessed by it, but I think it's helpful. Okay, but there's something else underneath the corpus callosum that crosses over the top of the thalamus.
Got it.
That's true. It's that structure there. The fornix. So actually, on a good day, you might well see the fornix there. We've got a hippocampus down the bottom here. We're going to draw in a few minutes. It's coming out around the top of the thalamus, over the thalamus, and under the corpus callosum. Okay? And then, and I hope I haven't boxed myself in a bit too much here, but I'm going to have serious problems. But I need to make a triangle. And the triangle is going to be formed like that. Whoops. With the caudate nucleus and the thalamus and the lentiform nucleus, which is the globus pallidus and the cutaneum. And the space in between it is going to be internal capsule. Okay. I'm going to make this a little smaller here because I've boxed myself in slightly. Okay. But I've got to find a space through here in which, so I really, tell you what, I'm going to try to be a bit more modest with my thalamus here. Okay? I'm going to have 3 caudate nucleus like that, and I need to have a triangular shaped, oops, this is a little bit longer, lentiform nucleus like that. Maybe I should have this thalamus a bit shorter. There's two more over there. And I'm going to try and do the same thing here to have a caudate nucleus and a lentiform nucleus. I'm going to break it into two parts this time. So it has
Globus
Globus pallidus.
Globus pallidus,
Yeah. That's right. So the globus pallidus and the pterygium are the two by name, but you're quite correct that the globus pallidus, when you look at it, actually looks as if it's divided into two parts. And when you look at a real brain, although we call it a structure with boundaries at the edge, actually it's so full of white matter tracts that it doesn't have the clear boundary that it seems to have elsewhere. And
Yeah, there's I can pop that.
okay. All right, so let's make a bit more of an opportunity here for internal. So that's our internal capsule running all the way down there towards the cerebral peduncles in the midbrain. Okay? So we need, of course, 3 capsules, yes, which are internal capsule and, very good, and what's going to, so I can see the gap between the internal and the external. What's the third one going to be? What's the structure that's going to separate that? A claustrum. Is everyone familiar with a claustrum? I draw it like that. Okay, it looks like a line with same little things you have on those curly brackets, you know. And I'm not entirely sure, but I think the claustrum was an early attempt to make cortex before we got cortex going properly. Are we ready to go?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not tricky to do. You just need to draw an outline of the brain, like that. Maybe have a little practice in the corner first, a few small ones, you know, so you can just get a feel for it. Most people do left hemispheres in the same way that the mid-sagittal, most people do right hemispheres, because right-handed people can draw that line a little better. So a nice long structure like that. Remember, you want to have a bit of a space here at the bottom. So if you wanted to, you could put your cerebellum in. And your brainstem if it needs to change like that. Okay. Right, everybody. So let's at least name some of these things. I mean, obviously that's the cerebellum, and obviously that's the pons and the medulla. We don't have to worry about those. What's the name of that structure, that big? The fissure of Sylvius?
Or the lateral.
Or the lateral fissure. Lateral sulcus, if you want. Okay. And if you pulled it apart, which structure would you see? The insula, yes? Latin for? Island. Anyone know this other name? It's the island of Ryle. R-I-E-L, I think is the spelling. Okay. Ryle. I think it's R-I-E-L, but my spelling of that could be wrong. Anyway, everyone calls it insula, that's fine. Okay, so we're comfortable with where we are. I'm now going to draw a large sulcus or fissure all the way from the top to the bottom, which is
Rolando.
the fissure of Rolando, or the central fissure, central sulcus. Okay, and we've already talked about this. Just put 2 parallel lines in here for the PCG and the PCG. When you look on actual brains, which we'll get a chance to see later, I mean, what I draw here is this idealized version, and sulcal patterns vary quite widely. The best thing to look for is the two parallel lines of these gyri. That's your best way, and then orient it slightly back, and they should be about halfway along. So if you get a chance to look at more than one brain, I would try to do that. It's quite helpful. Sometimes the pro-sections of the mid-central section have, if you look around the back, have the lateral surface, which is quite helpful. Okay, you can see why it's so easy over the next little while. So should we try the frontal lobe? Okay. Yes? In theory, and that forms which three gyri? Superior frontal gyrus, middle frontal gyrus, and inferior frontal gyrus. Okay. For those of you that are more anatomically interested, and especially interested in language, this area on the inferior frontal gyrus, and of course you know what that area is usually called. Have you know how to define it anatomically? I get our students, well, I wonder if Kate can remember the chances. Yeah, it is quadrant 44. It's the posterior 1/3 of the inferior frontal gyrus. Can we all say that together? The posterior 1/3 of the inferior frontal gyrus. And you can divide it up anatomically in a very interesting way. If you like, I'm going to knock out the inferior frontal gyrus there. Okay. There is, anyone care to name these two structures in here? They're the ascending and the horizontal ramus, R-A-M-U-S. And you can sometimes see them in around Broca's area. And they define this component of the frontal lobe into three different parts. The Latin word for which is pars, P-A-R-S. And you can see what the names look like. So this is pars orbitalis, because it's next to the orbital surface of the brain. Okay. This is pars triangularis, because it's a triangular shape. And any idea what the third one is? Opercularis, pars opercularis. And why is it opercular? Are you right?
Yeah.
My jokes aren't. Yes. Yes, and what do the opercular mean? Sort of the little outside of there, so outside of the insula. So three parts. So if you know that, you don't need to necessarily know the pars components, but it's quite fun to try to draw them if you want an A star or whatever. Okay? So, four gyri in the lateral view of the frontal lobe. Okay? Pre, superior, middle, and inferior frontal gyrus. Okay? Done. Easy peasy. The temporal lobe, just as easy. And it consists of superior temporal gyrus, middle temporal gyrus, inferior temporal gyrus. How easy is that? The back end over here is usually classified as. So, if Broca's area is the posterior 1/3 of the inferior frontal gyrus, then Shona, what does this mean? Can we all say that together? The posterior 1/3 of the superior temporal gyrus. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about it. It's really, you can see why this is your entry-level diagram. Then I'm going to draw at the back end of the precentral gyrus a structure that looks like that. Anyone care to name it? That is the intra-parietal sulcus. And it breaks the parietal lobe into two parts, or the rest of the parietal lobe, which are? Yes, you can finish that word. Some people call it the superior parietal lobe, which it can't be because it's not a lobe. So it's the superior parietal lobule and the inferior parietal lobule. Okay. And put two bounces there. Kate will get this right. Hope. That's correct. The supra marginal, because it's around the back of the sylvian fissure. Okay. And the angular gyrus below it. And if we're counting Brodmann numbers, then these are sort of 39 and 40 if you're Brodmann sensitive. Broca's area would be 44, 45, depends on how far forward you want to go. And Wernicke's, I think, is 20 or something, is that right?
So this is some fibers that connect the Wernicke and the focus area.
There are the famous arcuate fasciculus, but you can't of course see it. But yes. Okay, so we're nearly there. There's just two more structures I'd like to identify. So at the back end of the occipital lobe, I'm putting in something. What is that there? That's the calcarine sulcus, which of course is, we saw in the previous diagram, it's also primary visual cortex, V1, Brodmann number 17. Okay? You can't actually see the calcarine sulcus clearly on all brains from this lateral view. But I put it in because there's nothing else to see otherwise on the occipital lobe. There's no very clearly, consistently defined structures there. And I'm going to put a structure in over there. What is that? That's the parietal occipital sulcus. Again, hard to see on this view, but remember this was the cuneus that we were making on the medial surface, so it's nice to just see them there. And that really is all I want to do on this brain. It's so much easier than the last one, in terms of effort.